Welcome back. You are watching Moving Forward, a production of the Bain Grandstand Advancement Association. And our very, very special guest this evening is Mr. Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. And you've heard the passion that he displayed as he spoke about what happened in Bimini. But I can assure you folks, that was the first thing that impressed me about Robert Kennedy when he first came here in the year 2000 to assist us in the fight to save Clifton. His passion. I'll tell you a little joke. When we were expecting him, we wrote the relevant government agency requesting the use of the reception center, the VIP lounge at the old international airport for him to give an interview. We figured a person of his stature was entitled to that, as that concession was given to others, including athletes and entertainers and so forth. Unfortunately, we didn't get a response from the agency, and when Bobby's plane touched down, immediately they locked up the VIP center and they vanished from the airport. And although I was a bit embarrassed as his host, I thought that would deter him a little bit, but it didn't faze him at all. In fact, we end up holding the press conference in the parking lot amidst all of the trees and the debris and so forth. And he was just as passionate when he spoke about the importance of that Clifton site, as you have just seen. What was your experience when you first came in 2000?
Well, you know, I wouldn't be disturbed by something like that. I've been suing governments from the beginning. The group that the River Keepers was actually started by a group of commercial fishermen on the Hudson River back in 1966. Mm-hmm. And they were fighting pollution on the river that was destroying their fishery, destroying their livelihood, destroying the health of their children. And it was illegal pollution. And they went to the government agencies that are charged with shutting down that pollution and prosecuting the polluters. The Corps of Engineers, the Coast Guard, the State Conservation Agency, and they were given the bum's rush. They were told by the Corps Colonel in Manhattan, these are important people. Speaking of the Penn Central Board of Directors, which was the company that was dumping oil from a 4.5-foot pipe into the Hudson River. So the people in Crotonville, New York, which was where my movement started, the Waterkeeper movement started, came to the conclusion that government was in cahoots with the polluters, and that the only way that they were going to reclaim the river for themselves is if they confronted the polluters directly. And that's how our organization began, by suing polluters directly and saying, we know the government's not going to help us. In fact, we know in many cases the government is our enemy, that they're in league with these polluters. So I've actually been declared persona non grata by the government of Alberta, by the government of British Columbia, because I went into those provinces and I was suing big shots who were their friends, and sometimes suing the government itself. And you know, listen, wherever you see large-scale environmental injury, you're going to see, as I said before, the subversion of democracy. Particularly in the Bahamas, there's a terrible problem with lack of transparency in decision-making over what happens to Crown lands. So if you're a big developer and you want to get your hands on some Crown lands which belong to the poor and the rich in this country, you can go to a government official and say, let's meet in secret and iron this out between you and me. The public has no idea what's happening in those little meetings. There could be money passing under the table. There could be homes in the resort, and somebody could say, well, if you do this right, if you do it right by me, we'll put a home for you directly in the middle of our new resort.
But in order, let me balance this now. You were declared persona non grata in several of the states of Canada.
Yeah.
But in fairness, you were also in 2010 given the Hero of the Planet award for that same fight. You see, we got to balance.
And by the way, those provinces have since welcomed me back and given me awards.
Yes.
So it was different governments, you know, who were doing the wrong thing, and you have some governments that behave very well and try to undo the crimes of the past. But really what we need is transparency in government. We need freedom of information laws. We need permit hearings where the public gets to participate and understand the exact, all of the nuances of a deal by which Crown land is being converted. It doesn't mean we're anti-development. We're not. We're very pro-development, but it has to be good development. It has to be sensible development. And all the stakeholders need to be involved because all the stakeholders own that Crown land. So whatever disposition occurs, everybody should benefit, not just a few people at the top who get golf course memberships or payments under the table. And, you know, I said in your church yesterday, the way to cure corruption is the same way that you get rid of cockroaches. Cockroaches hate sunlight. Corruption dies and shrivels in the public sunlight. So you need transparency. We need to get rid of all the cockroaches in Bahamas and, you know, in the United States and elsewhere. The way that you do that is through transparency. You have to do everything in the open. If a government official wants to allow a big company in, you know, an anchor company, they call them, and build a resort, they need to make sure that the people in Porgytown and Alistown are going to get running water because of that resort, that they're going to get jobs, that they're going to get a stake in it, that they're going to be able to profit from it, that they're going to be able to do more than fold towels, cut grass, spray pesticides, and then leave at night, that they are going to be part and participants in every part of that resort. And you know what? The thing that struck me about that resort in Bimini is it's completely divorced from the Bahamas. What you have here is heaven. Yes. And it's not just the skies and the winds and the fish and the landscape, but it's the people of this country, the culture. People want to see that. People pay, you know, to go on vacations to New Orleans because there's beautiful houses and they're brilliantly colored and there's music and wonderful people and they get to mingle with them. Why would you create a culture where, why would you create a nation where there's a series of gated communities and then this beautiful culture that everybody ignores and nobody takes advantage of? People would come here the same way that you go to New Orleans on Mardi Gras to celebrate not only the beauty of the landscapes, but the beauty and the richness of Bahamian culture. Jamaica knows this. People, if you see the advertisements for Jamaica, it's all about the culture. It's the steel bands and people dancing and, you know, the friendliness of the people. But guess what? I've been to every island in the Caribbean. The Bahamian people are the most friendly in the Caribbean. Well, thank you. You don't see, there's no racial animus, there's no hostility. When you and I were driving through Bainstown yesterday, and when we were driving through Grandstown and over the hill, people didn't know who I was, but they'd see me in the window of the car and everybody was waving at me. People would greet me on the street. They had no idea who I was. And, you know, that is a wonderful thing that people from all over the world want to experience. Why would you build a resort that fences out the Bahamian people and fences out, and, you know, that resort looks like they took a piece of Orlando and dumped it onto the most beautiful bay in the Bahamas. Why would you do that? You know, the bay was there. It was beautiful. The people in Alistown are beautiful people. The people in Porgytown are beautiful people. Why would you try to, you know, excise, surgically remove a piece of Orlando and dump it on the most beautiful island in the world and destroy the fisheries, and destroy the whole reason that everybody comes there? The only reason to do that is if somebody was taking a payoff, and somebody was taking a payoff. I've seen this too many times, and I know how it works, and that's what happened. The Bahamian people were sold out by government officials. It's a crime. It's a sin against humanity. It's a sin against future generations. And we have to figure out something to do in the Bahamas where we get sunlight into the political process so an atrocity, a crime like that never happens here again.
Well, that's the same thing you said 20 years ago about Clifton. And when you came, you brought a perspective that we didn't have, because you brought the international perspective. You knew the international players. You knew Bechtel Corporation. They were the financial backers of this project. And after you familiarized yourself with all of the aspects of the fight, you went back to the United States and you really went to battle. You brought political pressure, environmental pressure on those developers. How was that?
Well, I mean, in honesty, an honest appraisal is that Bechtel was one of the easiest companies ever to back down. And the reason was Bechtel is run still by a family in San Francisco who has a lot of reputational sensibilities and sensitivities. And as soon as we started making noise about this, we started doing editorials. We called politicians. We did all the little, Martin Luther King said that the tools of advocacy are agitation, legislation, litigation, and, ultimately innovation. And we used all of those tools. And the first developer was the hardest one to get rid of, which was Chafin and Light.
Yes.
If you remember those guys, they had put a lot of investment in and they didn't want to leave. But eventually they sold their stake to Bechtel. And Bechtel quickly realized that this was a toxic project. It was a radioactive project, and I think they have a lot of other big things happening in the world, and they didn't want to tarnish their reputation. And they knew once we got involved that there were going to be reputational liabilities that would hurt their capacity to operate in other nations in the world. They didn't want to get a name like Monsanto, where when they appear, everybody says, oh, this is bad news, this is an evil company. They have they're frightened of reputational liabilities, so they were kind of much easier to back off. And then, and that's what you do. You have to keep delaying them and delaying them and delaying them. And then, you guys had an incredible victory down here where you were actually, most times we get an environmental victory, it is never a permanent victory. You have to wait for the next guy to get in the ring, and then you have to slug it out with him. But in this case, we got a permanent victory because that was declared a national heritage site here in the Bahamas, and it's now permanently protected. What we need to do now is to do that give that same protection to the entire reef system.
Yes.
Around New Providence Island. And let me tell you something. I've been diving in Cuba on the Gardens of the Queen, which Fidel Castro 50 years ago, or 40 years ago, declared it a protected site. It's about 1,000 square miles on the southern shore of Cuba. And that place looks like the Bahamas did 50 years ago. And, underwater, the reefs are alive, they're vibrant, you see all the colors. The fish are there, there's 300-pound grouper, there's sharks, there's all the fish that are supposed to be there are there. So we can restore these reefs, and people will come from all over the world to see them. But right now, the reefs in the Bahamas are all in trouble. Many of them, it's very sad because there has been a huge deterioration since the last time I came here. The stag coral, the elkhorn coral is lying in kind of boneyards on the bottom, and it's very, very sad. But if we give them protection, and we have the ability to do that, to extend the Clifton Park so it goes also, it becomes a marine park as well. And if we can do that, we can begin to regenerate that reef. And there's now technologies for helping these reefs to regenerate. and we can build something here that will bring people back to the Bahamas.
That's right.
Because everybody wants to see this today.
Well, that's the final phase of our fight, because in 2004, when the government established a land park, we recommended that they extend it to include the marine park. They indicated at the time that the land park was very simple to do because the government already owned the land. But they said the sea park would take a little while longer and they would work at it. Well, we accepted that and we waited a little while. But instead of them establishing the marine park, another threat occurred, which was the unregulated development at Nygaard Key. And that threatened that whole system. And we engaged that in battle. That seemed now, with the help of a lot of organizations, notably Save the Bays and REA, they seem to have backed off. But the government still has to establish the marine protected area, and that's what we're fighting for now. Now, do you have any suggestion as to how we can continue to fight that?
No, but let me say this first, because you and I went with Fred Smith,
Yes.
who's been a brilliant lawyer for us, and who is the Clifton Bay keeper, and Joe Darville, who's the Grand Bahamas waterkeeper, and Rashima Ingram, who's the Bimini waterkeeper. They're all part of our organization. And Fred has been really brilliantly fighting Peter Nygaard, along
Yes,
with your
of
help
course.
for many, many years. And I've watched, we helped save Jaws Beach.
Yes.
But then I watched Jaws Beach disappearing.
Yes.
Because Nygaard was stealing all the sand as it came to the harbor, dredging it out, burying the coral reef in order to increase the size of his property. And I would come down here and say to Fred, people would go to jail for this in the United States. Why isn't this guy in prison? You can't just steal public land like that with no permit. And eventually, it took them 20 years, but eventually Peter Nygaard's now an international fugitive. If he comes to the Bahamas, he will be arrested. We were able to jump off the boat where you took us yesterday and swim to shore at Nygaard's property, and we stayed below the high tide mark, but we saw from there that the entire place is now in deterioration. I think there was a fire there in 2009, and this kind of sinister kingdom that he had illegally built on top of by stealing the land of Bahamians and stealing the sand from Jaws Beach. And Jaws Beach, which we worked so hard to save, was turning into a rock pile, which was not a very inviting place for people from Nassau to bring their children. I was so happy yesterday when we went back there and saw that now that we've shut down Nygaard, that sand is being replenished on the beach, and the people had a very happy, magical place to go.
It was a wonderful sight.
We pulled our boat from Stewart Cove up about 200 feet from shore, and hundreds of people swam out to greet us and to say,
And they were so
"You're a
happy,
beloved
everybody."
figure. You're a beloved figure," and they all recognize you, and we're waving at you, and they were waving at Fred Smith, and it was like an amazing thank you from the people of Nassau for what you guys have been doing for 2 decades fighting that very, very evil man. And I'm so happy that he's holed up in Winnipeg, Canada, in the freezing cold right now, and he can't come back and sit on
That was an enjoyable experience yesterday. We're going to talk about that a little more when we return from this final break. Folks, don't go away. I'm sure you're enjoying this, and we've got a lot more from Bobby today.
Only love can save us now. Only love.